Well, I thank the gentlelady for yielding. And Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong support of the majestic and time-honored sport of thoroughbred racing, a beloved tradition in the United States since the early days of the Republic and the signature industry of my home state, the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Sometimes referred to as the sport of kings, Americans, and I would dare to say especially Kentuckians, have made this the sport of all Americans through the inspiring stories of amazing athletes with names like Sir Barton, Man o' War, War Admiral, Secretariat, Seattle Slew, Affirmed, and American Pharaoh and Justify in recent years. To that end, I further rise in favor of H.R. 1754, the Horseracing Integrity and Safety Act, bipartisan legislation that I introduced in one form or another during the last 3 terms of Congress with my colleague and good friend, the gentleman from New York, Paul Tonko. And I thank Paul for his partnership in this long, tireless effort. After many years of negotiation and deliberation, today I stand proud to finally bring this legislation to the House floor for a vote. Throughout my time in Congress, I have worked diligently to enact policies that will promote economic growth and investment in this key Kentucky industry. My district, Kentucky's 6th Congressional District, well known as the horse capital of the world, is home to more than 400 horse farms and the world-famous Keeneland Racecourse in Lexington, Kentucky, which not only serves as the global leader in breeding stock sales, but also hosts many notable races, including the graded Toyota Bluegrass Stakes and the Breeders' Cup, which will be once again held at the racetrack this November. Many of my constituents have a close connection to and an affinity for both Keeneland and thoroughbred racing. My own grandfather, J.B. Falconer, was Keeneland's first publicist and later the vice president of the Thoroughbred Racing Associations in New York, where he was credited with naming the Eclipse Awards. Several years ago, as I reviewed the minutes of the Jockey Club roundtable meetings, when my grandfather was active in the industry, I noticed that even then, 4 and 5 decades ago, leaders in the industry lamented the lack of unity among the various constituencies within the industry. They regretted the fact that there wasn't uniformity in the rules of racing, and particularly in medication rules. And thoroughbred racing is not just about our culture and heritage. There has always been immense pride in the enormous contributions of this great sport to American culture. But it is also a major source of jobs and economic opportunity for our people. In fact, the industry is responsible for 44,100 direct jobs and over 16,000 indirect jobs in Kentucky alone. With the privilege of representing this unique industry comes the responsibility of fighting for its future. This sport is not solely relevant in those states that are home to the Triple Crown, like Kentucky, Maryland, and New York. Horse racing is very much a national sport, prominent in places like California, Florida, Arkansas, New Jersey, Illinois, and Louisiana. The horse industry contributes approximately $26 billion, as my friend Paul Tonko pointed out, but in some estimates up to $50 billion in direct economic impact to the U.S. economy. And it has a direct employment impact of 988,394 jobs. Therefore, advocating for this industry requires more than just celebrating its proud heritage. I've always believed that the future prosperity of this sport depends on uniformity of the rules of racing, and currently has been noted regulated by 38 separate racing jurisdictions. The thoroughbred horse racing industry labors under a patchwork of conflicting and inconsistent state-based rules governing prohibited substances, lab accreditation, testing, and penalties for violations. This lack of uniformity has impeded interstate commerce. It has compromised the international competitiveness of the industry. It has undermined public confidence in the safety and integrity of the sport. And the industry is in desperate need of certainty. As a conservative who believes in federalism and states' rights, I nevertheless understand that the Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate interstate commerce precisely for the purpose of eliminating these kinds of impediments to interstate exchange. And as I've said many times, as a limited government conservative, this legislative effort is not about more regulation. It is about creating a single nationwide set of rules that will result in smarter, more effective, and streamlined regulation for the industry. The Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act will remedy this lack of uniformity, the issue central to maintaining the integrity of the sport, by authorizing the creation of a non-governmental regulatory safety authority and fairness governed by representatives of all major constituencies of the industry and responsible for implementing a national uniform medication and track safety program. Specifically, the legislation would recognize the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority, which will be tasked with creating uniform national standards regarding prohibited and permitted substances for use in racehorses, establishing an accreditation system for laboratories to test drug samples, and developing regional standards for racetrack safety. As I've said, this legislation builds on the bipartisan legislation Representative Tonko and I have introduced in previous Congresses and incorporates feedback from an expanded group of industry stakeholders to enact these much-needed reforms that will protect the safety of our equine and human athletes. I want to thank the coalition of organizations that have supported this legislation from the very beginning, including the Water Hay Oats Alliance, and a special thanks goes to Arthur and Stacy Hancock, my constituents of Stone Farm in Bourbon County, Kentucky, for their tireless and relentless persistence and advocacy. The Jockey Club, Breeders' Cup International, headquartered in my district, Keeneland, the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association, the Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association, and the Jockeys Guild, because the jockeys know how important safety is, with a special mention of Chris McCarron for advocating for his fellow jockeys and their safety. I also want to thank members of our expanded coalition, including CEO Bill Carstangen and the board of directors of Churchill Downs International and prominent trainer Dale Romans. I want to thank Ed Whitfield, former member of Congress from Kentucky, who really trailblazed on this issue. And I want to thank Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell for his leadership in not only introducing companion legislation, but legislation that I believe materially improves on our previous versions by adding a focus on track surface safety and by making reasonable minor changes that have enabled us to enlarge our coalition of support and bring more organizations within the industry together in support of our legislation. Madam Speaker, the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act was developed through a highly deliberative and bipartisan process and takes into consideration a diversity of perspectives from all parts of the industry. I appreciate the willingness of all constituencies within the industry to compromise and to forge a consensus product. This was not easy, but it was necessary to get us to this day, this historic day for this great sport. The result is support from the majority of members of this House and Senator McConnell's bipartisan companion legislation in the Senate. Today's vote is a vitally important step in advancing reforms to protect our equine athletes and jockeys, to ensure confidence in the safety and integrity of the sport within the majority of the wagering public, and enable the industry to attract a new generation of fans and investors, to strengthen the thoroughbred breed. And because this is truly an international sport and industry, this bill will make American thoroughbred racing and breeding stronger and more internationally competitive. And it will also secure the thousands of both direct and indirect jobs in the 6th Congressional District and beyond that depend on a thriving thoroughbred horse racing and breeding industry. I want to thank Chairman Pallone for his leadership on this issue, Ranking Member Walden for joining to help shepherd this legislation through the process, and especially, again, my good friend Paul Tonko, who represents a great American race course in Saratoga Springs. And I really appreciate, in this time of admitted partisanship and polarization, an opportunity for this country to come together and unite behind a great cause. And with that, I urge my colleagues to support the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act, and I yield the balance of my time.